Have you ever walked into your home and felt something heavy in the air, but you couldn't quite explain it? A silence that feels too loud, a tension that lingers, even when there's no reason for it. You try to find peace, but it slips away like sand through your fingers. You pray, but it feels like something is resisting you. You do everything right, yet there is a darkness you cannot name. My dear brothers and sisters, there is a battle many of us are fighting without realizing, and it is not outside our walls, it is inside them. We often think of spiritual battles as something we face in the outside world, the temptations, the tests, the trials that come from beyond. But sometimes the fight is right where you live, right where you sleep, and the enemy is not coming through the front door with horns and fire. He is already sitting quietly on your shelf, hanging on your wall, playing in the background of your favorite song, smiling from the souvenir you brought back from that distant trip. This is how spiritual contamination works. Not always loud, often silent, but deeply destructive. As Allah Almighty says in the Quran, indeed, those who fear Allah, when an evil thought touches them from Satan, they remember and at once they have insight. Sometimes it is not only thoughts that touch us, it is the atmosphere around us. And sometimes that atmosphere has been shaped by the things we allowed into our homes without realizing what they brought with them. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, when the night comes, then keep your children close, for the devils spread out at that time. This tells us something very powerful. Darkness brings activity that we do not see. There are forces at play that move in spaces we consider safe. And while our homes should be places of safety, they can become battlegrounds if we are not careful. You see, we clean our homes from dust and dirt, we wipe the floors, we organize the shelves. But when was the last time we cleaned them spiritually? When did we last walk through our homes, not with a broom, but with prayer? When did we last ask ourselves, does this item honor Almighty? Would I place this in front of Him if He were to enter my house? These are questions that pierce through the illusion of safety. Because not everything that sits quietly in your home is innocent. Some things carry with them a history, a dedication, a spiritual weight. There are items that might have been gifted to you, handed down through generations, or picked up without a second thought. A statue, a carved figure, a piece of jewelry with symbols you never questioned, a book filled with dark ideas, music that celebrates the very things we beg Allah Almighty to protect us from. These are not just decorations, they are influences. They speak without words. They shape your space, your thoughts, your mood, your spirit. And the danger is not always in what we see, it is in what we cannot see. Because the enemy works through what is tolerated, through what is welcomed unknowingly. And when we allow things into our homes that are connected to falsehood, we risk inviting an energy that fights against the peace we so desperately seek. There was once a man who lived with constant arguments in his home. Every day was a battle. He blamed stress, work, his spouse. But deep down he felt something was wrong until one night he prayed for clarity. And as he walked through his home, his eyes stopped on an object. A sculpture he had bought years ago from a faraway market. It was beautiful, but he never understood its meaning. That night, something inside him told him to remove it. The next day, the atmosphere changed. He couldn't explain it, but the heaviness lifted. My beloved brothers and sisters, we cannot keep crying for peace while holding on to what blocks it. We cannot ask for light whilst surrounding ourselves with shadows. The peace of Allah Almighty is real, but so is the unrest caused by what invites the opposite. So I ask you now, not to judge, not to fear, but to reflect. What is in your home that does not belong? What are you allowing to sit in your sacred space that may be opening a door you never intended to open? This is not superstition. This is spiritual awareness. And when we begin to see with the eyes of our heart, we begin to realize that everything we allow into our homes has a voice. And if it does not speak of truth, of purity, of remembrance, then it is speaking something else. Let today be the beginning of a new awareness. Not one of fear, but of awakening. Not one of guilt, but of cleansing. You have more power than you think. Not by strength, but by submission. When you submit to Allah Almighty and seek to fill your home with what pleases Him, His peace will follow. And when His peace enters, every darkness must leave. You do not need to understand everything to begin. You only need to be willing to let go of what does not belong. And when you do that, my dear brother, my dear sister, you will begin to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Stillness, clarity, light, and the comfort of knowing that your home is no longer a battlefield, but a sanctuary. A place where angels come, a place where hearts heal, a place where the presence of Allah Almighty is welcomed. Have you ever wondered why certain struggles never leave, no matter how much you pray? You wake up every day and ask Allah Almighty for peace. You beg Him for relief. You fast, you cry, you plead, and yet the tension remains, the fear lingers, the confusion does not go away. Could it be, my beloved brother, my dear sister, that the very thing you are praying against is something you have unknowingly allowed to stay? We often speak of spiritual protection as though it only comes from what we do. We focus on our prayers, our good deeds, our worship. And yes, those things matter. But protection is not just about what you perform. It is about what you permit. Because the truth is, what you allow in your space will eventually shape your spirit. It will influence your thoughts, your feelings, your atmosphere. It will either invite the mercy of Allah Almighty or resist it. As Allah Almighty says in the Quran, and do not follow that of which you have no knowledge. Indeed, the hearing, the sight, and the heart, about all those will be questioned. You see, there is a responsibility on us, a trust. Not just in what we say or do, but in what we allow into our homes, our lives, our hearts. Because silence is not always innocence. And ignorance does not stop conflict. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, whoever among you sees an evil, let him change it with his hand. If he cannot, then with his tongue. If he cannot, then with his heart. And that is the weakest of faith. Some of us have evil sitting in our homes right now. Not because we chose it intentionally, but because we never questioned it. We never asked, does this bring me closer to Allah Almighty, or does it pull me away? We think an item is just an item. A necklace is just jewelry. A sculpture is just art. A book is just paper. But in the spiritual world, nothing is ever just what it seems. Everything carries meaning. Everything carries energy. Some objects are rooted in light, others in darkness. And if you keep something that was once used for evil, if you wear something that symbolizes falsehood, if you read or display something that promotes rebellion against Allah Almighty, then you are allowing its influence into your space. And what you allow, you empower. This is how the enemy works, quietly, through access, through legal rights in the unseen realm. He doesn't need your permission in words, he just needs your tolerance in practice. If you bring into your home something tied to false beliefs, if you accept a gift that was prayed over in darkness, if you hold on to something that carries a curse, you have unknowingly made an agreement. And that agreement gives power to something that was never meant to dwell with you. I once met a young man who struggled with tormenting thoughts, nightmares, anxiety. He prayed, he sought help, but nothing changed. Until one day he felt the urge to go through his belongings. In the corner of his room was an old tapestry he had bought while traveling. Beautiful, intricate, and mysterious. But it was covered in symbols he did not understand. When he removed it, something lifted. He slept peacefully that night. For the first time in years. What changed? The object left. And with it, the presence that came attached to it. My dear listener, not everything that enters your life is meant to stay. Some things come with chains, not blessings. And if you want your home to be a place of peace, you must become protective over what you let inside. Because what you let inside, you give permission to. What you ignore, you empower. This is not about fear, it is about wisdom. It is about knowing that Allah Almighty has given you the ability to guard your space. Your home is your sanctuary. And when you fill it with things that honor Him, He sends His angels. His mercy descends, His protection surrounds. But when you fill it with things that grieve His commands, His peace begins to withdraw. And in its place, confusion comes, discomfort settles, restlessness grows. Sometimes the battle isn't in your effort, it's in your environment. You are praying for peace, but you are living in the middle of what prevents it. And no matter how much you try to ignore it, the impact will not go away until the invitation is removed. So today, ask yourself sincerely, what have I allowed that I would never openly invite? What have I tolerated because I thought it was too small to matter? What am I holding on to that does not belong in the home of someone seeking Allah Almighty's light? This is your opportunity to reclaim your space, not with fear, but with faith. Walk through your home, speak to Allah Almighty, touch your items, reflect on your walls, examine your shelves, and ask, does this welcome angels or repel them? Does this item help my soul or harm it? Because when you begin to remove what doesn't belong, you will feel something shift. The heaviness will begin to lift. The fog will start to clear. The atmosphere will slowly change. Not because of what you did, but because of what you undid. You closed the door. You revoked permission. You empowered peace by removing what empowered darkness. And in that moment, you will understand a secret that many never learn. That real protection doesn't begin with your hands. It begins with your decisions. And when you choose to honor Allah Almighty with what you allow, He will honor you with what He provides. Every object tells a story. Every item we bring into our home carries a message, whether we realize it or not. Some things speak of joy and remembrance. Others whisper of pain and loss. And some, though silent to our ears, speak loudly in the unseen realm. You may think it is just a gift, just a decoration, just something small sitting on a shelf. But the question is not what it means to you. The question is what it represents in the spiritual world. There are moments in life when something feels off and no amount of prayer seems to lift the weight. You go from room to room seeking clarity, but it hides from you. You try to rest, but rest does not come. You speak words of truth, but something in the atmosphere feels like resistance. In those moments, pause and ask, what have I allowed to remain that may be carrying a story not written by Allah Almighty? As Allah Almighty says in the Quran, and whoever turns away from my remembrance, indeed he will have a depressed life, and we will gather him on the day of resurrection blind. Sometimes the depression we feel is not born from inside us. Sometimes it is carried into our homes through things that block the remembrance of Allah Almighty. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, angels do not enter a house in which there is a dog or an image. This is a profound teaching, not just about pictures or physical animals. It reminds us that the presence of angels is sensitive. They do not coexist with certain things. And if the angels withdraw, what remains? I remember speaking to a woman who shared her struggle with constant sorrow. She had tried everything, ruqyah, prayer, fasting, but a sadness followed her everywhere. One evening she decided to walk through her home while reciting verses of the Quran. As she moved, her heart tightened near a certain corner. There stood a shelf of artifacts, souvenirs from different countries. Beautiful, yes, but one item in particular made her feel uneasy. A small carved idol she had purchased during a vacation. She had never thought about it deeply, but that night she removed it. The next day, something shifted. She told me she felt like a cloud had lifted. Her children laughed more. The home felt lighter. It wasn't the act of throwing something away, it was what that act represented. She had closed a door she didn't know was open. There was a brother who battled with severe anxiety. He could not rest, his nights were filled with panic, and despite his prayers he felt no peace. One night he cried out to Allah Almighty asking for a sign. That night he had a dream of his old closet. In it were books from his past, books on sorcery and dark themes that he had kept from his teenage years. He had forgotten them, but the next morning he found them exactly where the dream had shown. He removed them, burned them, and repented. From that day his mind felt lighter, his heart calmer. My beloved brothers and sisters, these are not fairy tales, these are real stories, and they happen more often than we realize. What you keep in your home speaks. What you display carries influence, and while the world may call it superstition, the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, tell us plainly that not everything is harmless. Not everything is spiritually neutral. Look around your home. Do you have symbols that represent other beliefs? Gifts from people whose hearts are filled with envy? Objects that have passed through many hands, but you have no idea what intentions came with them? We must be careful, because what we display we honor, and what we honor we invite. A sister once told me that her child had been having disturbing dreams for months. She prayed over him every night, but the dreams continued. Then one day, while cleaning his room, she found a poster, dark, violent, and filled with strange symbols. She hadn't noticed it before. A friend had given it to him. Without hesitation, she took it down. That very night, the dreams stopped. Why? Because when the invitation is withdrawn, the influence leaves with it. Some objects carry beauty, but not every beautiful thing brings light. Some were created to honor other powers, other spirits, other false beliefs. And when we place them in our homes, we align with what they represent, even unknowingly. But ignorance does not protect us from consequence. And that is why Allah Almighty in His mercy reminds us again and again to be mindful, to reflect, to turn back. There is a reason why the righteous before us would purify their homes, why they would not accept gifts blindly, why they were selective in what they allowed into their sacred space, because they understood that their home was not just walls and furniture. It was their refuge, their sanctuary, a place where the remembrance of Allah Almighty should flow like fresh air. And anything that blocked that, anything that disrupted that, did not belong. So I ask you now, not to be afraid, but to be aware. What stories are being told in your home through the things you have kept? What memories are tied to pain but still hang on your walls? What objects are rooted in falsehood but remain in your possession because they look harmless? Let this be your moment of honesty, your moment of courage. Walk through your home. Ask Allah Almighty to show you what does not belong. He will guide you. And when you find it, do not hesitate. Let it go. Because the sooner you remove the story that darkness wrote, the sooner you make room for the story of healing, mercy and light that Allah Almighty wants to write in your home. Have you ever noticed how certain music makes you feel restless? How some movies leave a strange unease in your heart? How the words from a song, even days later, still echo in your mind? It's not just a coincidence. What you listen to, what you watch, what you read, these are not harmless distractions. They shape your heart, your mind, and the very atmosphere of your home. Many people think entertainment is just for fun. They believe it doesn't affect their spirit. But let me ask you something. If entertainment is so harmless, why does it affect your mood? Why does it stir certain emotions? Why does it stay with you long after it ends? My dear brothers and sisters, we have underestimated the power of what we invite into our hearts through our eyes and ears. As Allah Almighty says in the Quran, and do not pursue that of which you have no knowledge. Indeed, the hearing, the sight, and the heart, all those will be questioned. The hearing, the sight, the heart, all three are connected. What you hear enters your heart. What you watch plants seeds in your thoughts, and those seeds grow whether you notice them or not. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, a person is upon the religion of his close friend, so let one of you look at whom he befriends. Now consider this. What if the closest voices in your life are not real people, but the artists you listen to every day, the actors you watch on your screens, the characters in your favorite shows? They influence your thinking, they stir your emotions, and they speak to your soul even when you're not paying attention. There was a sister who told me she struggled with deep sadness. Every night she would cry and not know why. She prayed, she sought help, but the sadness remained. One day while cleaning her room, she stopped to look at the lyrics of the songs she had been playing on repeat. Songs about heartbreak, betrayal, and despair. In that moment, she realized she had been feeding her spirit with sorrow. She made a choice that day. She removed every song that did not uplift her soul. Within weeks, her heart felt lighter, her prayers felt stronger, her sadness began to fade. You see, what we consume, we become. If your home is filled with the sound of rebellion, darkness, violence, and hopelessness, how can peace dwell there? How can tranquility survive in an atmosphere where chaos is constantly playing in the background? Some people say, it's just a show, it's just music, it doesn't mean anything. But in the spiritual realm, it means everything. The enemy does not need your full attention, he just needs your permission. If you let his voice fill your home, he will not stay silent. He will speak through every lyric that mocks morality, every scene that celebrates what Almighty has forbidden, every story that makes disobedience seem normal or even beautiful. There was a young man who battled with uncontrollable anger. His relationships were breaking down. His nights were filled with guilt. When he sought advice, someone asked him, what fills your time? He listed his favorite shows, each one full of revenge, violence, and hate. He had been soaking in rage episode after episode, thinking it was just entertainment. But what entered his eyes had found its way into his heart. He made a decision that day. He removed every show that stirred anger in him. And slowly, something changed. His spirit calmed. His reactions softened. And the anger no longer controlled him. My beloved listener, if the peace of Allah Almighty feels far from your home, look at what you have allowed to speak into your environment. Not every voice belongs there. Not every message deserves a place in your heart. And not every form of entertainment is entertainment. Some things are subtle poison. They taste sweet at first, but they leave bitterness in your soul. Live in a time where darkness is wrapped in glitter, where disobedience is packaged as art, where sin is sold as freedom. And if we are not careful, we begin to accept what we would have once rejected. Slowly, quietly, one scene at a time. There is a reason why the early believers were so careful. They did not only guard their tongues, they guarded their eyes and ears. They knew that whatever enters those gates begins to shape the heart. And the heart is the place where faith lives. It is the place where the love of Almighty should grow. So I ask you now, gently but with urgency, what are you playing in your home? What are you watching in your private time? What messages are echoing through your speakers? Because those messages do not leave when the music stops. They linger. They rest in your walls. They shape the atmosphere of your space. You want peace? Remove what glorifies unrest. You want clarity? Mute what confuses the soul. You want light? Turn off what invites darkness. Your home should be a place where the words of Allah Almighty are honored, where His presence is welcomed. And that means removing the sounds and sights that push Him away. Today, walk through your home with new eyes. Ask yourself, does this bring me closer to my Lord? If it doesn't, let it go. Because what you allow into your home is what you allow into your life. And when you cleanse your space from what distracts, Allah Almighty will fill it with what heals. Some things in our homes carry memories. A letter, a photo, a piece of jewelry, a gift from someone long gone. We hold on to them because they remind us of a moment, a season, a person. And while not all memories are harmful, there are some that quietly chain us to the very past. You may look around your home and feel peace, yet still wonder why your heart feels pulled back into old emotions, why certain patterns resurfaces just when you thought it had passed. Sometimes it is not because you haven't moved on, it's because you're still holding on. Not in your thoughts, but in your hands, in your drawers, on your shelves. You've kept, but Allah Almighty asked you to release. As Allah Almighty says in the Quran, and whoever puts their trust in Allah, then He is sufficient for them. Letting go is an act of trust. It is believing that when you release something tied to darkness or pain, Allah Almighty will replace it with something better. But if your heart is still tied to yesterday through what you've chosen to keep, how can He fill your life with the blessings of today? The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, you will never give up something for the sake of Allah except that He will replace it with something better. These are not just words, they are a divine promise. But many of us delay our healing because we are still holding on to reminders of a past that brought more harm than growth. The sister once shared that she had left a toxic relationship years ago. She had done everything right. She prayed, she fasted, she stayed away, but the emotional pain remained. It clung to her like a shadow. One day, as she was cleaning, she found a box in the back of her closet. Inside were photos, letters, and a bracelet he had given her. Her heart sank. She hadn't thought about them in years, but the moment she held them, all the emotions came rushing back. She knew right then this was her anchor. The past had been allowed to live in her home through a few forgotten items. That day, she let them go. And from that moment, she felt something shift. The pain didn't vanish overnight, but it no longer ruled her heart. My dear brothers and sisters, some of us have filled our homes with memories we no longer need. Things from relationships Allah Almighty saved us from. Items connected to sins we've already repented from. Symbols of lives we no longer live. But as long as those objects remain, they serve as quiet ties to the past. And when you allow a tie to remain, the enemy uses it to pull you back. Not all chains are visible. Some are wrapped in silk, in sentimental value, in the illusion of harmlessness. But spiritually, they carry a presence. They carry energy. And when you keep them, you keep the door to the past cracked open. A door that Allah Almighty already closed for your protection. There was a young man who had embraced a new life of faith. He had changed his habits, his company, his surroundings. But he often felt spiritually stuck. During a deep moment of reflection, he remembered a drawer he never opened. In it were items from a time when he was far from Allah Almighty. He hadn't used them, but he also never let them go. That night, he made a decision. He emptied the drawer. As he threw each item away, he said quietly, I choose what Allah wants for me. And in that moment, his heart felt a freedom he hadn't known in years. It's not just about obvious items. Sometimes it's a song that reminds you of someone you should have forgotten. A gift that ties you to a person who harmed you. A souvenir from a place where your heart was far from Allah Almighty. These things may seem small, but they carry reminders. And reminders are powerful. Must ask ourselves honestly, if something was born from a time of disobedience, can it really carry peace? If something came from someone who pulled us away from our values, does it belong in a space where we want the presence of Allah Almighty? Letting go of sentimental items is not about erasing your past. It is about honoring your future. It is saying to your Lord, I am ready to receive what you have for me without dragging old pain behind me. And when you take that step, even if it hurts a little, the reward is far greater. Because Allah Almighty sees what you give up for Him. And He responds not with silence, but with mercy. So today, take a walk through your home. Look at the things you've been holding on to. Ask yourself, why is this still here? And if the answer is rooted in pain, guilt, or disobedience, then let it go. You don't need to carry yesterday into your tomorrow, especially when Allah Almighty has promised you something better. Free your hands, free your space, free your heart, and watch how the peace of Allah Almighty begins to flow into the places where old memories once lived. Because the moment you choose to release what is no longer yours, Allah Almighty gives you more than you ever imagined. Your home is more than just a place where you sleep. It is more than walls and a roof. It is where your soul finds rest. It is where you gather with the people you love. It is where you worship, where you break your fast, where you bow your head in prayer. And because of that, your home carries spiritual weight. It is not just a shelter from the rain. It is meant to be a shelter from darkness too. But many of us forget this. We spend time decorating, designing, organizing. We care about how clean our space looks. But how clean is the spiritual atmosphere? Do we invite the presence of Allah Almighty into our homes with the same attention we give to style and beauty? Or have we let things remain that block His mercy from settling inside? As Allah Almighty says in the Quran, my mercy encompasses all things, so I will decree it for those who are mindful of me, give charity and believe in our signs. His mercy is wide, it is endless. But it rests where it is welcomed. It settles where hearts remember Him and where homes honor His name. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, do not turn your homes into graves. Indeed, Satan flees from the house in which Surah Al-Baqarah is recited. That hadith alone tells us how serious the matter is. A home that is filled with light will drive away darkness. But a home where no remembrance of Allah Almighty is found becomes empty in the worst way. Even if it looks beautiful on the outside, the soul can feel that something is missing. Now ask yourself, what kind of atmosphere have you created in your home? Is it a place where peace is felt when you walk through the door? Or is there always tension, confusion, and restlessness? Sometimes the answer is not in how much we decorate, but in how much we invite Allah Almighty into the space. Some people wonder why they feel anxious the moment they return home. They wonder why arguments break out without reason, why children become restless, why sleep is disturbed. And they blame life, they blame stress, they blame exhaustion. But the real reason could be spiritual, because what we allow into our homes affects the atmosphere more than we think. A woman once told me she felt uneasy every time she entered her living room. She couldn't explain it. She thought maybe she was imagining things, but deep down she knew something was off. She started to pray regularly in that room, asking Allah Almighty to show her what was wrong. One day, her eyes fell on a large painting that hung above her couch. It was gifted by a friend who had no connection to faith. The painting was beautiful, but filled with symbols she never understood. That day, she took it down. And from that moment, the room felt different. She described it as a sudden calm, a stillness she hadn't felt in years. You see, some things don't belong in a space that is meant to welcome light. And even though they may not scream their darkness, they carry it quietly in their colors, in their shapes, in their meanings, in the spirit with which they were created or gifted. Your home should be a place where angels feel welcome, where the name of Allah Almighty is spoken often, where the Quran is heard, where remembrance flows like soft wind through every corner. But if there are objects, sounds, or practices in your home that invite the opposite, you cannot expect peace to stay for long. There was a man who felt that his prayers had become dry. He prayed on time, he fasted, he gave in charity, but his home felt heavy. He began to wonder if something was blocking the spiritual flow. One day, while moving furniture, he came across a stack of old magazines hidden behind a cupboard. He remembered how in his past he had collected them secretly, and though he had stopped that lifestyle, he had never truly cleared it out. That night he burned them, not out of anger, but out of release. And after that, his prayer felt alive again. He said it was as though something had been lifted off his chest. My dear brother, my dear sister, You are the guardian of your home. You are responsible for what enters and what remains. You cannot control